So now I have my information scaled down and I have an 11 by 17 sheet of paper here so we can start to lay out our images. I also have all the other information at full scale, which makes it very difficult for me to work with this stuff because my units are in feet. So I'm actually going to select all this info and I'm going to export it. And I'm going to export it as a Rhino 5 file, which should be your default. And I'm going to change the name of it to 11 by 17 board layout. And I'm going to hit save. So now I'm going to zoom all the way out. I'm just going to hit save on this file and we're done with this file for now. If you want to make more drawings for yourself, this is the file to do it in. Scale it down and then export that information out. So I'm going to hit the X and I'm going to look for that new exported file that I created, which is here. Okay, so now I should just have only my make 2D surfaces. The reason why I kept the surface layer is because I had it as my selected layer, so I'm just going to do a command called Purge. What purging does is it removes any layers that don't have any information on them. So if you have extra layers in your file that don't have any lines, surfaces, solids, points, any of that stuff, and you do purge, and you hit enter, it's going to get rid of it. And just to check, my surfaces has actually my 11 by 17 on it. So I'm going to change the name of that to 11 by 17 border. And I'm going to lock it so that way it doesn't move around at all.
Can you explain purging?
Purge? Yeah, so let's say if I have a bunch of layers, right? Like this. So I've created a ton of layers. They're all on here. They all have nothing on them. If, for instance, you have a bunch of extra layers, like this, or if you're working on a file and you end up deleting layers or information, but you don't delete the layer, you type in the word purge, and up here it tells you a series of things, and they all say yes. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to purge all this information. So layers is one of those options. And so as soon as you hit enter, all those layers disappeared because there was no information on them. So purging is a way to get rid of excess information in your Rhino file.
So we don't need to pick or select the specific layers.
And delete it? Not necessarily. If there's information on that, it won't purge though, right? Like, so since I have curves on these layers here, it's not going to purge any of this information. But if you have extra layers, it'll get rid of those layers for you.
Now this one is the lock that
Yeah, probably got rid of it. Okay, so let's start to lay our board out. So we have a lot of information on here. I'm going to select it all and just sort of move it off to the side so it's not on our board. And I noticed my board isn't on the 0, 0, 0 point, so I'm actually going to move it this corner, the bottom corner, to 0, 0, 0. Now it's in place, and I'm going to lock that layer so I can't select my border. And I'm going to change the color of it to red so it's really apparent that it's there. So now what we need to do is start laying out our information. So I'm going to select it, and I want to be able to select these things really easily. So I'm going to group it. So I'm going to type the command group. And now when I select this, the whole thing is going to move. And if I happen to turn off some layers, and I move it, and I turn on those layers again, it's going to follow suit with it even though it's off. So that's just something to note, is when you group something together, even if you have the layer off, that information still moves with whatever you're doing. So here's our site plan. I'm going to move it onto our board here. And I'm going to group our elevations here. And I'm just going to kind of move those onto the board to start to get a feel of where everything could lay out. Next, and every time before I select something, I'm going to group it first so that way I can really move around my objects. I'm just going to group everything first, just so it's taken care of and out of the way. Group that one, and group that one. Okay, so now I'm going to start to move all this information onto the board, and now we just need to come up with a good strategy for laying everything out, right? And right now everything's at the same exact scale, so maybe we want to make some things a little bit bigger, so that way not everything is the exact same scale and we have a little bit of diversity. And so one thing I want to make bigger is our section drawing, because that's probably our most interesting drawing that we have so far. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to type scale. And I'm going to click on a point and then I'm going to type 2 because I want to double its size. So I'm going to take it back to 16th. And now this drawing is at 16th scale and everything else is at 32nd. Another thing to keep in mind is you want to have a margin for yourself, because when you print this, the printer is only going to be able to print so far. So I'm going to create a margin for myself. I'm going to offset my border, and I'm going to choose a distance of 0.5 inches. And then I'm just going to go ahead and relock the layer. And I'm going to know I'm going to keep all my drawings within that 0.5 inches. So let's say if I want to select that edge there and kind of move it like that.
How much?
I did 1/2 inch. A better way to justify your margin is to know how borderless your printer can print. If your printer can print all the way to the edges, then have information as close as you want to the edge. But some printers will have like a margin of 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. And so I'm doing 1/2 of an inch, so that way we're just inset. When you're holding this piece of paper, you have room for your thumb when you're holding it. And so when you're picking it up and touching it, your thumb isn't covering your drawing, right? You can have your thumbs at the 1/2 inch, right? So it's just something to consider. Okay, so I put the section drawing right here. And I justified it basically as close as possible each edge from the top and then there as well. And so that looks good to me. And so now I want to work on my next image here. And I think what I'm going to do is move these 2 images over. And really this is just about figuring out the best method to lay it out. You could lay this out many different ways. I'm just trying to help you sort of figure out a strategy for laying out your own version of this. So one thing I'm going to do is, since this is in landscape and this diagram right here is sort of not in landscape mode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the directionality of it. So I'm going to move everything. One thing I'm going to change is my units, so that way I can change these things and change it in inches easily. So I'm going to go inches, and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to zoom extents. So now I've got my thing back on track again. So I'm going to select the bottom 3 and I'm going to move them over, and I'm going to find an appropriate distance, which is about 5 inches. I changed my units to inches, so that way when I type 4, it moves 4 inches, not 4 feet. And when I check distances, it checks my distances in inches rather than in feet, because otherwise it's going to give you it's going to say it's like 0.54. Yes. So now that I moved that over 5, I'm going to deselect these two. Or, sorry, I'm going to select these two and move it over again 5. And then move this last one over 5 again. And now I'm going to, let's see here. So I need to like align all these together. So I'm just going to select one curve here, and I'm just going to draw a straight line. And I'm going to know that, and I'm actually going to select a point that's really obvious. So I'm going to do that one. And I'm going to move each one of these up to that point like so. And I don't know if that's the right one or not. Let's see here. Yes, it is the right one. And I'm just going to follow suit and move all these other ones up. And move this one up. And I'm snapping them all to the line. If you notice it's not going straight up, you might need to turn either your intersect or your perpendicular on in order to achieve that. So now I've got all these in a row, and I'm actually going